Indiana Jones is one of the most iconic, beloved, and influential movie heroes of all time. He embodies the spirit of adventure and partakes in some of the most exciting escapades put on screen. But with nearly 40 years and two highly controversial films between now and Indy's ride into the sunset in The Last Crusade, it may be easy to forget the past and dismiss Dr. Jones as an outdated relic. This disillusionment may seem logical. Novelty and nostalgia always wear off after enough time, but all it takes to sweep away any cynicism is a viewing of the original Indy trilogy. As Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark might say, these films have aged like a watch buried in the sand. The perfect union of settings, action, stories, and characters that is the Indy trilogy results in a legendary protagonist who embodies the ultimate adventurer. Much of the characterization of an adventurer comes not from himself, but the world he exists in. All three original Indy films take place in the late 1930s, and this time period, that is neither modern nor ancient, provides near limitless possibilities for Indiana's journeys. He could be flying an airplane or wielding a sword, evading Nazis in Berlin, or battling pagan cultists in the jungles of India. This variety of backdrops allows Indiana to embody practically every manner of hero. The shootout in Club Obi-Wan could be from a Bond film, while the fight with Mullah Ram on the suspension bridge may have occurred in ancient history. Indy's journeys always lead him to some supernatural artifact, blending in the fantasy genre and adding a mysticism to the stories. It is as if Indy's expeditions take him across time as well as space. This apparent time travel aligns perfectly with Dr. Jones's official profession, archaeology. Obviously, these films are not accurate depictions of archaeological work, but they beautifully capture the appeal of the study. The places Indy visits, the people he meets, and the treasures he finds are enough to make any viewer at least briefly consider a career change. A widespread failing of modern adventure movies is their lack of care in developing settings. A quick establishing shot of a computer rendered landscape and a handful of plot developments are often all a region gets before getting dropped in favor of a change in scenery. These half baked attempts at world building feel more like visual distractions than integral elements of the story. The Indiana Jones films, on the other hand, are willing to dedicate large portions of their runtime to their locations. Every place Indy visits is shown in vivid, lifelike detail and features its own side characters and action scenes. As a result, the audience feels privileged to get to visit locales such as Cairo or Venice, and these places leave an impression on their imaginations. Even ordinary settings, such as Indy's house or his university, have a distinct character, charm, and reality. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas made Indiana Jones as a tribute to the old adventure flicks they saw as kids, and the Indy trilogy marvelously succeeds in recapturing their spirit. The entire appearance of the trilogy aligns with the adventure movies of old, while seamlessly integrating the technical advancements of the 1980s. A key component in the world building, atmosphere, and character of these movies is a non visual element the music. Composed and conducted by the legendary John Williams, the music of the Indiana Jones films adds wonder, energy, power, and spirit to the on screen locations and events. Even the homage paid to the adventure films of old is carried through in the music. Many themes, particularly Marion's theme, closely resemble the sound of the great film composers of the 1930s and 40s, such as Max Steiner or Eric Wolfgang Korngold. The result of all of this is a variety of memorable locations that feel truly alive. A good adventure must provide its adventurer with trials that push him beyond his limits. There must be an assortment of dangers with grave consequences for failure. Once the trial is overcome, the audience should want to cheer with relief, only to find the hero in a new, bigger, deadlier ordeal. All of this is achieved by the action sequences in the Indiana Jones trilogy. Just like the settings of the films, the action is greatly diverse depending on where Indiana is, who he's with, and what's around him. Indy is forced to use every weapon at his disposal, whether it is his fists, revolver, whip, or whatever nearby object has the most destructive potential. Nearly every kind of vehicle is either used by or against Indy. Cars, trucks, airplanes, zeppelins, boats, submarines, minecarts, trains, and tanks are all prominently featured. Even the individual henchmen who fight Indy are memorable. Characters like the giant German muscle man, the Chinese gangsters, and the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword add personality to the conflicts and keep Indiana's opponents from becoming faceless bad guys. Indy's rivals are not just humans. Booby traps, natural hazards, and animals all make attempts on his life. Often, multiple dangers group together in a single sequence, such as when young Indiana has to fight a knife man on top of a moving train while a rhinoceros in the freight car below tries to skewer him. These combinations result in action that is unpredictable and full of depth. Many situations Indy finds himself in are outlandish and even comical, but they never become unbelievable. Whether or not all of Indy's accomplishments are possible, they seem real. Much of this comes from the extensive use of stunt work and practical effects. Real stuntmen, real vehicles, real explosions, and real animals all bring an authenticity and material presence to the films in a way CGI can rarely compete with. The realism is also aided by the identifiable, tactile nature of the scenarios the characters are put in. The textures and detail of structures, natural land formations, and clothing is relatable to the audience. They intuitively understand the feelings and smells of what's on screen. This also extends to the way the action scenes play out. The way Indy, Willie, and Short Round are thrown around inside the speeding minecart, or the way Indy clings to the tank's side gun as rock and dirt falls on his head, is tangible and relatable for the viewer. The fight scenes in the Indy trilogy are vicious, and this is only enhanced by the realism. These films don't soften up the violence like so many current PG-13 action movies do. They show blood and depict some brutal ways to die. It's not an overt bloodbath, just a believable amount. This brutality enhances the stakes, tension, and a drama of the action. Indy can and does get hurt badly, and the viewer is never quite certain if he will last to the end credits. Spectacle and action alone cannot carry a film. There must be a good story too. Each film in the trilogy tells a story that is simple and immediately engaging. The straightforward and unpretentious nature of the plots perfectly fits the idea of recreating old adventure films. This simplicity does not connotate stupidity. These films still maintain intelligence, emotional impact, and thematic depth. The plots of the Indy trilogy sell themselves. Indiana must race the Nazis to locate the Ark of the Covenant. Indiana uncovers and wages a private war on an ancient cult in rural India. Indiana reunites with his father and evades Nazis in a search for the Holy Grail. These are objectively great concepts, brimming with potential danger and excitement. A major part of the immediate appeal of these storylines are the MacGuffins. The term MacGuffin, coined by Alfred Hitchcock, refers to the item within a story that the protagonists and antagonists fight over. The Ark and the Grail loom large in the public conscious, making the audience riveted to know what they will look like when the Indy finds them and what they will do. The Sankara stones in Temple of Doom admittedly aren't as compelling, but are still well utilized, especially during the climax. There is a great element of mystery to the Indy films. He has to search for leads on the locations of artifacts and unravel conspiracies being plotted behind his back. He is like a detective, only all the clues are archaeology themed. Solving these mysteries always leads to surprises for both Indy and the audience. The amount of effort and investigation it takes Indy to find the MacGuffins, along with the fact that they are never shown to the audience until he sees them, makes it a thrill for the viewer when he reaches the objective of his quest. Among the thrills of the Indy movies is the consistent presence of humor. Incorporating comedy into an action film carries high risk, as it can easily destroy tension, drama, and immersion if mishandled. Fortunately, the humor in the Indy trilogy is perfectly timed, bringing a new dimension of fun to the movies without hindering the serious moments. Whether a physical gag resulting from a ridiculous situation, or the banter spurred by characters like Short Round or Henry Jones Sr., these moments of levity make the movies highly enjoyable to watch all the way through, especially during breaks in the action. As devoted the Indy trilogy is to being a fun thrill ride, it still maintains the emotional core that separates great films from masterpieces. This comes from the characters, mostly Indy and his allies, who feel like real, living people. Their relationships with each other are layered and authentic, with lows and highs. The films provide many touching moments, from Short Round saving Indy to Henry Jones Sr. believing he has lost his son. Like the humor, the emotional moments are well placed, not interrupting the pacing and tone of the story, but enhancing them. Some movie trilogies are only trilogies because the series lost its financing before a fourth entry could be made. This is not the case with the Indiana Jones franchise, which was intended as a trilogy from the beginning. The three films form together beautifully into a complete experience. Raiders of the Lost Ark introduces Indiana and his world with a gripping, action packed adventure. Most sequels are just copies of the originals, with expanded budgets, sometimes even verging on being remakes. Temple of Doom, on the other hand, is a radically different film from Raiders, from its story to its setting and its villains, yet still retains the core elements that made Indy great. This deviation is brilliant because it allows The Last Crusade, which carries over many aspects from Raiders, to round out the trilogy as a complete body of films. A great film needs a great story, and a great story needs great characters. Obviously, Indiana Jones is one of cinema's greatest heroes, but it is not him alone who carries the story. The trilogy is filled with memorable characters, heroic and villainous. Like the Bond series, each film has its own Indy girl, a pretty leading lady with romantic interest in Dr. Jones. Unlike the Bond girls, each of these women is a unique personality who has a completely different dynamic with Indy. Marion Ravenwood from Raiders of the Lost Ark is the perfect partner for Indiana. She shares his bravery and adventurous spirit while calling out his shortcomings without demeaning him. All too many female leads in current films rival their lovers, constantly trying to outperform them in intelligence, strength, screen time, and importance to the plot. Marion never overshadows Indy. He is unquestionably the main character of every scene. Instead, she only adds to him, backing him up whenever he's in a tight corner and extending a helping hand when he's at the end of his rope. If Marion is the perfect woman for Indy, then Willie Scott is the most imperfect. Her film, The Temple of Doom, takes place a year before the events of Raiders, meaning she has essentially broken up with Indy before the movie starts. She is petty, selfish, and completely out of touch with reality. She is an annoying character, and this is entirely intentional. Her purpose in the film is comic relief, burdening Indy with her complaints and panics. Her unlikability allows the film to pick on her to comedic effect, throwing her into the most extreme and terrifying circumstances. Her ridiculous and entirely unhelpful reactions to every situation, paired with Indy's exasperation, make for some hilarious interactions. The comedy of her sheer incompetence is only heightened by her contrast with Short Round, a child who is infinitely more helpful in every way. Willie isn't an entirely shallow character, however. By the end of the film, she has started to get the hang of adventuring. The Last Crusade brings Elsa Schneider, a historian, into Indiana's life. At first, she seems to be a shallow replacement for Marion, but soon turns into Indy's punishment for not sticking with the right woman. She betrays him to the Nazis, who recruited her in their search for the Holy Grail. She is a femme fatale who considers the progress of her field to be the greatest good. Although she shows regret for some of her choices, it is not enough to save her from the consequences of her hubris. Marion is Indy's romantic interest. Willie is the butt of the joke, and Elsa is a different kind of villain from Indy's other nemesis. Speaking of which, the Indy films are very much about the heroes, which means the villains don't necessarily have to be much more than plot points. But this is not the case. The villains of Indiana Jones are great. They are simple, yet interesting and formidable. Much of this comes from their presentation. Most of the villains are played by actors with distinct appearances, such as the strong-jawed Wolf Collar and the Peter Lorre-esque Ronald Lacey in Raiders, or the massive, imposing Amrish Puri in Temple of Doom. They are also consistently threatening. They make smart choices and frequently have the upper hand. My favorite of the villains is the French archaeologist Belloc, Indiana's dark counterpart, who is sold out to the Nazis in order to find the Ark of the Covenant. The way he parallels Indy while simultaneously being nothing like him makes for some fascinating interactions between hero and villain. Indy never had an archenemy, as none of his opponents lasted longer than a single movie, but Belloc came closer than anybody to achieving that status. Of course, not everybody Indy encounters is an enemy or lover. There are a variety of friendly side characters who aid him in his escapades. There's the Egyptian Sala, who always has Indy's back, and Marcus Brody, a fellow archaeologist who makes up for his lack of survival skills with his loyalty and moral character. Even minor characters, such as the aircraft pilot who helps Indy escape from South America, or the British infantry captain who saves Indy from the cultists, are likable and memorable in their simplicity. But the best of these side characters are without a doubt Short Round in Temple of Doom and Henry Jones Sr. in Last Crusade. Short Round is an orphan Indiana took under his wing during his time in China. It's a wholesome dynamic, with Indy acting as a sort of father figure. Short Round adds much to the film, being an essential assistant to Indy and engaging in some hilarious banter with him. His absurd competence, paired with his childish innocence, makes him one of the most lovable sidekicks in film. On the opposite end of the age spectrum is Indiana's father, Henry Jones Sr., played brilliantly by the great Sean Connery. On his own, he is a fascinating character, an aged but sharp archaeologist on the verge of achieving the goal of his life, finding the Holy Grail. The fact that he is the father of Indiana Jones only makes him more intriguing. When he finally makes his grand entrance in the film, the audience is brimming with curiosity. He more than lives up to this anticipation. He is the source of much of the film's comic relief, without ever becoming a fool. Like Marion, he doesn't compete with Indy's coolness, instead handling each hazardous situation with a radically different approach from his son. The father-son relationship between him and Indy is not just funny, but the very heart of the film. They are estranged from each other, and the whole adventure of the film serves as a backdrop for their reconciliation. The adventure, action, story, and characters of the trilogy all combine into one of the greatest cinematic experiences of all time, and at the center is, of course, the hero, the title character, Indiana Jones himself. He is the kind of character the audience can never get enough of. Through every scene, he manages to be awesome, interesting, and wildly entertaining. Every one of his qualities aligns to create a perfect protagonist who manages to be both mythological and relatable. That name, Indiana Jones, that combination of an unusual, extravagant first name and an ordinary last name. It's eye-catching and exciting, but it's not dark or ominous like Mad Max or Snake Plissken. It's a colorful and honest name. Even the abbreviation, Indy, sounds trustworthy. It's also believable as a name someone like Dr. Jones would go by. To quote the tagline on Temple of Doom's poster, if adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones. His appearance lives up to his name. Harrison Ford immediately demands the viewer's attention and respect. His brown leather jacket, the same color as the earthy ruins he explores, with his whip and holster on his belt, quietly tell of years of experience in adventuring. And then there is his fedora. That hat isn't just an item of clothing, it's an extension of himself. When he puts it on, he's ready to challenge the world. It isn't just a catchy name and striking outfit that make a hero impressive. What truly separates a hero from an ordinary person is his actions and abilities. Indy is athletic. He can run, jump, climb, as well as fight with nearly every weapon possible. His strength is equaled by his intelligence. He often has to think his way out of dangerous situations with very little time to spare. His archaeological background gives his adventures a distinct character. His whip, an item rarely depicted in fiction, is one of the coolest signature weapons used by an action hero. It displays both his physical strength when used to harm his enemies and quick intellect when used as a tool of escape. All of these incredible qualities would be wasted if Indiana wasn't compelling as a character. He is admirable and charismatic while still having his own human vices. Much of this is due to Harrison Ford's spectacular performance. The audience wants to see him put in different situations, not just because he is awesome, but because his reactions and point of view are fascinating. Indy is something of an unconventional action hero. He isn't an invulnerable superhuman like the majority of tough guy protagonists. He gets hurt, he gets scared, he gets angry, and he bleeds. He doesn't try to maintain a statue-like stoicism. His priority is staying alive. Often, he ends up being the butt of a painful physical gag. This vulnerability adds personality and realism to the action because of Indy's direct responses to the events surrounding him. As mentioned previously, it greatly heightens the tension. He isn't bulletproof, and each dangerous encounter could be his last. Even more important, it makes Indy relatable. The audience can easily identify with his panicked expressions and yells of agony. The risk of depicting a hero this way is it can degrade him. Most modern movie protagonists, particularly men, who the filmmakers portray this way become belittled and embarrassed. Instead, Indy's vulnerability only makes him cooler. The fact that he is in pain and afraid makes his feats of heroism and athleticism even more extraordinary. Although much humor is directed at him, it is always good natured, never attempting to humiliate him. Indiana is a character of contradictions. He is larger than life and yet is relatable. He has the dull profession of a professor of archaeology, but is also an adventurer. He is courageous in the face of all dangers, and is scared but witless by snakes. He is anything but a family man, and still is great with kids. He is not superstitious or religious, yet understands and uses the supernatural. These conflicting traits add to his believability as a human. We are all hypocrites, while enhancing his legendary status. He is like a myth that changes depending on who is telling the story. Like any great legendary figure, Indy is not a dynamic character. He is always himself from the start of the trilogy to the end. But, despite this apparent stagnation, he still changes and grows with each journey. Each of the three films in the Indiana Jones trilogy sees Indy undergo a change, and this character development serves as the center of the film's themes. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, he learns how to hold a relationship with the woman he loves. In the Temple of Doom, he gives up his personal ambitions to make a moral choice. Finally, in The Last Crusade, he repairs his relationship with his father when they both let go of the lifelong pursuits that separated them. These themes are simple but meaningful and give a greater purpose to Indiana's adventure than the recovery of a MacGuffin. Captivating settings, thrilling action, gripping storylines, and superb characters all contribute to the formation of the ultimate adventurer, Indiana Jones. He is an unforgettable hero who has delighted moviegoers for over 40 years and will continue to do so as long as the original trilogy of films is watched. At the end of The Last Crusade, when Indy drinks the water of eternal life from the Holy Grail, he cements himself as an immortal figure of modern mythology.